Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Olivia Albrighton Vanway. I am calling in from Georgetown University's Center for Security and Emerging Technology. I am the Assistant Director of Operations here, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to our first hiring info session today. So before we get started, just a few words on logistics. So first thing, all of our attendees are muted and your cameras are off. If you happen to have any technical difficulty during the session, please feel free to use the chat function. That'll notify my colleagues, or you can send us an email at cset@georgetown.edu. The session will be recorded. We will post the session on our website, and we'll also share the link and links to other materials we'll share during the session in an email as a follow-up. And lastly, if you have any questions for our panelists when it's time for the Q&A, please just enter them into the chat function. We might not be able to get to everyone's question today, but we will be updating our FAQ document, and we'll share that also in the email follow-up with answers to general questions after today's session. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So today I'll be joined by a number of my colleagues who will share insight on CSET's work, what it's like to work here, and key considerations for job applicants. We'll conclude with a panel and discussion with 4 current CSET research analysts and data research analysts. I'll get started with an overview, and then I will be joined by Igor Miklik-Terera. He is our Director of Analysis. And so here at CSET, I have on this slide our mission. We seek to provide rigorous data-driven analysis on emerging tech and the security implications to policymakers, while also preparing a generation of future decision makers. So that means we value and invest in our analyst professional development with dedicated funding and a robust internal professional development program, which has included anything from day in the life panel discussions from employees across federal agencies, tech firms, and NGOs. We do intensive writing coaching, as well as data visualization, if I can say that right, and Excel, Google Sheets trainings, and much more. I'm sure that our panelists will get into some of these opportunities in greater detail later. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them about that as well. So, as you can see here from our team chart breakdown, our analysis team, which is where our research analysts sit, is by far our largest team. Igor will share a little bit more about what our analysts do in a moment, but needless to say, our research analysts, fellows, and senior fellows who make up our analysis team, and the biggest bar on the chart here, are essential to CSET's success. Likewise, our data team, which is our second largest team overall, and where our data research analysts sit, they provide access to terabytes and terabytes of data on patents, research publications, employments, and job data, and so much more. So the data team and the analysis team really work hand in hand and are the bread and butter to help produce CSET work. So in 2021, we published more than 90 reports, and we can expect to continue publishing great work for years to come. So to tell you more about our lines of research and what our team focuses on, I would like to introduce you to Dr. Igor Miklik-Terera. Hi, Igor, welcome.
Thank you, Olivia.
So Igor has served as CSET's Director of Analysis for almost 3 years. And in this role, he manages the bulk of our research analysts and fellows and provides leadership on establishing our research agenda and really just makes CSET a wonderful place to work overall. So Igor, thanks so much for joining us today. Over to you.
Thank you. Slide, please. We are tackling emerging technologies and their effect on national security, but that's a gigantic field. So we are focused a bit more specifically. In particular, we're very interested in artificial intelligence, how artificial intelligence interacts with cyber. And we are recently started expanding into biotechnology. Even these are very broad topics. So our research is focused in some very specific areas that I'll talk about and describe briefly now. But I want to mention, we want to know when you apply, what of these topics excites you? What is it you want to work on? We're automatically going to look across these when we see your application to see where we think there's a match with our needs. But I want to know what topic here is going to make you want to come work with us, right? And knowing that is really important to me. So what are these lines of research? These are broad themes we focus on. And the first one is AI applications, really in the national security space. And we don't care about AI making things 5% better. It's where is the introduction of AI going to radically change how parts of government operate, or get us a radical advantage in national security spaces that other nations won't have. On top of, you've probably heard the stories of how painful it is for the government to incorporate technology, how many years it takes to get a cutting edge airplane delivered to the military. How's that going to work for AI? How do we inject it into the government? Where does it go best? And more importantly, how do you train and organize? Revolutionary technology often changes the way the government itself works, which means it's got to change how we organize. Another key line is standards and testing. Obviously, we all want AI to be safe and effective, whether the government is using it in national defense or whether it's being used to figure out who qualifies for loans. How do you ensure that? What standards apply? What does it mean to test across these disparate fields that AI is used for? And how do you get tests to happen, right? Is the right way to have the equivalent of a UL sticker like you do on electrical devices on every AI? Not sure, but what are the tools the government has to promote standards and testing? As I mentioned, another field is how cyber and AI intersect. Think of it, two different kinds of information technology. They could either clash or they could rapidly accelerate each other. Where does this go? AI potentially could let you do cyber at scale. Does that mean that small little countries can now operate in cyberspace at the same level as large countries? Is a whole new type of cyber operation going to be possible? These are the kinds of things that program explores. Behind any technology is a huge workforce. So not only the people who are brilliant in artificial intelligence, but this whole village of people it takes to develop a product and put it out there. Everything from the user interface designers to the lawyers who are going to get the patents on things, to the marketeers who are going to make sure it sells, whether it's to the Department of Defense or to elsewhere in the government or to the public at large. Where is this workforce? How do we train this workforce for the future? And especially government, how do they get them and retain them? Big question you probably heard about that we're focused on is we're in a technology competition with at least China and perhaps in some areas other countries. What does a technology competition mean? What does it mean for us to be ahead of the allies? And in particular, what policies can the US government do without interfering? And we're not going to be a command economy, but how can we incentivize and drive technology and innovation in the United States? How do we leverage our friends and partners in other nations? And how do we protect our own technologies from being stolen by the people we don't want to? A related piece that we spend a lot of time thinking about are supply chains. Supply chains are obviously a weakness for the United States if too much of the supply chain is overseas for technology, but it's also a powerful lever if there are choke points that the US or its friends controls, which can keep us and our partner nations in the leadership of key technologies. And even though we could do that perhaps in some places, when does it make sense to? Or when are we just going to drive another nation to accelerate their own efforts to reach parity with our technology? And speaking of other nations who might be competitors, it's hard to stay ahead of somebody or compete with them if you don't know where they are. We have a space where we are trying to watch what our strategic competitors, China primarily in the technology space, Russia also, what are they doing? Where are they investing in research? Why? Trying to understand that. Are there surprises that they might snap on us where they are getting ahead of us in places that really matter to us? And in general, how are they acquiring their technology? Are they, do they invent it? Or are there centers of invention? Who are their experts? Are they acquiring it from other countries through perhaps trade practices that aren't quite fair in our point of view? In addition, I mentioned before that we are lucky in the United States to have a range of partners and friends. How do we work with those countries? How do we find an ecosystem of technology sharing across these nations that's a win-win partnership with these countries so that they are developing their own technological capabilities in a way that is parallel and in concert with ours, and create overall a stronger community within the friendly nations? And finally, the last one I'll touch on is the area of biorisk and biotechnology. We are focused on trying to understand what risky bio research is and where it's being performed, and is any of that concerning? There are also tremendous differences across country about what is considered research that's appropriate, whether it be on animals of different types, including primates, or even on humans. And to the extent that there are significant differences in what experiments are allowed, that creates real inequities and perhaps incentives for some firms to move to other countries just so they can perform those kinds of experiments. And how does that affect the development of technology? Where does it develop? And what are tools the government can use to try to level the playing field in this sense? So that's a really quick overview of the work. But again, tell us which of these you find exciting, and look forward to seeing your application.
Thanks so much, Igor. All right, so I know this session will mainly focus on our data research analyst and our research analyst positions, but we are hiring for multiple positions. I'll just go over this real quick. On our screen, we have a list of a couple others. Our cyber AI research fellow position is open again, and that will close on March 14th. We're also hiring for our wonderful operations team, a business operations and management specialist, and that will close on March 4th. To stay up to date on our open positions, you can visit our career page that is updated regularly. It's cset.georgetown.edu/careers, or by signing up for our newsletter. So now that Igor has covered what our researchers study, I'll go ahead and hand this off to Rita Kanaev, to describe who they are.
Great, thank you, Olivia. So
you're welcome. Just a quick word. Sorry, Dr. Kanaev is CSET's Associate Director of Analysis. Sorry about that. And she is our LOR lead for the regional line of research. She currently manages 4 research analysts and will share some insights on what we're looking for in the candidates. Sorry, over to you, Rita.
Oh, that's great, thank you. So obviously, you can see what are the fundamentals of the research analyst position that we're describing, and we're hiring across different LORs. So these qualifications are going to matter for most, and to an extent matter for some more than for others. But I want to outline a few other things, skills, qualities, background, interests, and experiences that really are key for the type of people that we're interested in bringing aboard. And we're really the type of stuff that we're looking for when we're reading resumes, when we're reading your writing samples, when we're looking at your cover letters. So let me just get right into it. We are interested in people who have really excellent research, analytical, and writing skills. What does that really mean? It means that you are really good at distinguishing between reliable and unreliable data sources. It means that you can see patterns in data, but you can also see the gaps. It means that you are able to link different elements in a way that tells a really compelling and interesting and logical story. And even more so, you're able to make connections between single specific data points and to elevate it to ask broader questions. So kind of when you think about military speak, how do you connect the tactical level to more strategic conversations and discussions? More so, we really are interested in good, perhaps even excellent writers. We do on the research team, on the research analysts, do a lot of writing, and it's imperative that you have experience in that space as well. You don't need to be a published author, but you should have some of the, critical chops that come with being a good writer. That's something that we really, really value going forward. In terms of the background and the interests, given what CSET is focused on is emerging technologies and security being broadly defined, we have interest in bringing on board people that have either studied or worked or otherwise have exhibited interest in one or more of these subject areas. That means public policy, international security, national security, regional studies, specifically for MyOR, other areas such as computer science to an extent and data science. Those are things that we obviously value, but you don't need to be absolutely accomplished or advanced in those spaces, because that's where some of the DRAs that we're hiring, that my colleague Kat will elaborate on in a minute, are going to focus on. So for research analysts, we do expect a degree of literacy and understanding and interest in the technology space for sure. But if you have background in these other areas that I mentioned, like public policy, national security, international security, political economy, area studies, regional studies, you're more than welcome to apply, and we'd be really excited to consider you as a candidate. What are some other things? I would be remiss to say that we are really interested in people who are willing to learn, not just willing, but who are eager to learn. So this is an organization that started only a little over 3 years ago. And part of the reason that we have grown in size and we have been so successful is that we've strategically hired for people who are intellectually curious, who are hungry to know more about the space and to do important, conscientious work that is informed by, their desire to answer these important questions that are critical for national security and critical for how the United States and even the world more broadly continues to approach the development of artificial intelligence and other emerging technologies. So I hopefully have given you a little bit of an idea of the type of skills, the qualities, and the background that we're interested in. But at the same time, if you have background that is completely out of this world and you are suddenly just recently discovered artificial intelligence and national security, and you are super interested in really applying yourself to this space, and you can demonstrate some of those skills that I've described, we will also consider you as an applicant when it's relevant and appropriate. So we're excited to read your applications and answer your questions. And I'll give the stage to my colleague, Dr. Catherine Aiken.
Thanks, Rita.
Kat, let me just introduce you really quickly since we're nailing these transitions really well.
Thank you.
Sure. Kat Aiken serves as CSET's Director of Data Sciences and Research, and she's the one who's responsible for managing data sciences, data research analysts, and other CSETers, our colleagues who work on surveys and translations. As Olivia and Igor described earlier on, CSET has been this successful because of our ability to deal with and analyze and collect and buy and really understand massive amounts of data. And Kat has been the leader there. So she will tell you a bit more about what we're looking for in the data research analysts. Thanks, Kat.
Thank you, Rita. Yeah, so on the slide here, you can see some of the core requirements that we have for the data research analyst position. And I want to note that kind of some coding experience is required for this position, as you can see here, specifically demonstrated experience working in SQL and Python, ideally Python, but other programming languages, demonstrated experience or mastery of other programming languages is an appropriate substitute if, as it fits. So as these are noted in the position description, but I really want to highlight, I kind of want to go beyond the position description to highlight that the role is also an opportunity to learn and hone these skills. So what really makes for a successful DRA is some combination of experience, specifically the experience listed here in the slide, and kind of mixing that with a strong willingness to learn. So kind of piggybacking on what Rita said, this willingness and eagerness to take this kind of baseline of skills that you would have coming into the role and actually honing them, expanding upon them, applying them to new situations. That's really what is pretty critical to this DRA role. And then I also want to elaborate on a few things that are not mentioned in the slide and you would not see necessarily in a position description explicitly. But they are things that are equally important for the DRA role. And this includes a willingness to learn, not just broadly willingness to learn, but an actual applied willingness to learn new tools, whether it's data visualization tools or data analysis tools, and interacting with new data sets and new data sources. So the DRA role will interact with a lot of different lines of research that have been presented already today, and will work with a lot of different research fellows, research analysts on the analysis team. So being able to kind of communicate and interact with researchers who might be using different programming languages or who might have interest in several different data sets or data sources, and being able to kind of communicate and contribute to their work and support their work is really important. So this willingness to maybe not have mastery of all these tools when you come into the job, but willingness to kind of take on new challenges or identify new tools and being willing to take them on and learn them, and ideally being able to then communicate what you learn to other researchers who might not have the same level of data literacy that you would have as someone in the DRA role. So really it's this kind of taking this baseline of knowledge of data literacy that you would have as a DRA, but expanding upon it to become a go-to resource for others at CSET who are interested in making use of the data, understanding it, and using it to address their research questions. So on that point of working with the analysts and kind of being motivated by the research questions coming out of our analysis team and the researchers there, the DRA is really important as a kind of guide, right? A guide to explain or to work with or advise our researchers on the analysis team about what data is available. And as Rita said, we look for this in research analysts, but this is also important in our data research analysts, being able to identify strengths or weaknesses in any given data source, being able to know kind of what the gaps are and what might be missing and what the limitations are and how we need to articulate that in our research and what it might mean for the conclusions we can draw using that data. So having experience with research design and kind of broader lines of analysis would be really useful for this role, because you're also kind of engaging with the researchers at that level to kind of advise them on what the appropriate methodologies might be, not just, being the person who writes the code to pull the data. So on that point, and ideally a DRA would have some strong writing and analytic thinking skills. So we do ask for a writing sample, and please do provide that if you're interested in this role, because we would like to see the DRAs do, as both of the DRAs on today's panel have, author CSET research on their own, in addition to working with other researchers who are authoring work. So in sum, I just kind of want to note that successful DRAs, like the two that are on today's panel, they enjoy and thrive doing collaborative work. That's really important. And they also enjoy taking on problems and trying to find solutions to them. And so having the ability to navigate some level of ambiguity, to kind of work through open-ended questions or kind of broad ideas is really important for the DRA role. So DRAs are expected to kind of bring their own knowledge and bring their own expertise to the team, but couple that with an interest and curiosity to learn new things and take on new challenges. So I'll leave it at that for now. And Olivia, I'll turn it back over to you. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Kat. We nailed that transition pretty well, I'd like to think. So yes, thanks, Kat. Thank you, Rita. Thank you, Igor, for coming and giving a little more context on our open positions, our lines of research, and what you like to see in your candidates. So now I will let our attendees actually meet some of the potential future colleagues, those who sit in the roles that we've been discussing thus far. So it is time to introduce our panel. So if you have not already done so, please enter your questions into the chat box. I'm going to moderate them and ask our panelists or address them myself if I can. Note that we have addressed a number of frequently asked questions. We have an FAQ document on our careers page, but we will also drop it in the chat here for you all to look at as well. So I will go ahead and stop sharing my screen. Welcome my colleagues here with me. Maybe. Hello, everyone. Hi.
Hi, Olivia.
How are you guys doing?
Hi, everyone.
All right. So while we wait for some questions to come in, I will go ahead and ask a couple of my favorites. So I will ask each of you just to go around and just say who you are, what you do at CSET, maybe a few sentences on what you've accomplished or your background or whatever comes to mind. So Sarah, you want to go ahead and start?
Sure. Thanks, Olivia, and thanks everyone for being here. So I'm Sarah Abdullah. I'm a data research analyst here at CSET. Like Kat mentioned, the DRAs tend to work across multiple lines of research. I recently have been focusing on biotechnology and regions and workforce lines of research.
Autumn?
Sure. Hi, guys. My name is Autumn. I'm also a DRA here at CSET. I'm also a PhD student in the Department of Computer Science. I work with Lisa Singh, for any of you guys who might be Georgetown students. Someone asked if people could talk about their prior, like what they did before CSET. So I used to work at the Naval Research Laboratory as a research mathematician. My undergrad was in mathematics, and then I got a master's degree from GW in data science. So that's what I did before coming to CSET.
Thanks, Autumn. Jack?
Yeah, hi, everybody. I'm Jack Corrigan. I'm a research analyst here at CSET. I've spent most of my time working on our workforce research, so a lot of research related to kind of international flows of talent, how we can develop talent here in the United States. And then some other work outside of that, just looking at kind of how to improve the US innovation ecosystem a little more broadly. And yeah, before I came to CSET, I came from a writing background. So I was a journalist for like 2 years. I was reporting for a small publication owned by The Atlantic, reported on federal tech policy, federal investments in emerging technologies like AI. And then spent about a year doing freelance work. So I worked on a book for a little bit, was doing a couple of other freelance writing projects before I came here.
Thank you. Kayla?
Hello, everyone. I'm Kayla Good. I'm a research analyst, and I work on the cyber AI team and on AI workforce. So some of my research has included looking into Indonesia's tech sector, and as well as investigating things related to cybersecurity, and that spans from workforce development to education to cybersecurity competitions. Prior to joining CSET, I was a consultant with Deloitte for 2 years while I was completing my master's at Georgetown Security Studies program.
Thanks, Kayla. Last but not least, Micah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Micah Musser. I'm a research analyst here at CSET. Like Kayla, I work on the Cyber AI project. So I've written on the use of AI for cybersecurity, the security vulnerabilities of AI systems, and also the potential use of AI language models for disinformation campaigns. Before CSET, I actually started CSET in 2020 and graduated from Georgetown undergrad in 2019. So before CSET, I just wasn't doing that much beyond coursework. Although I did also previously work at Georgetown's Berkeley Center for Religion, Peace, and World Affairs.
Mike, I'm pretty sure you were doing much while doing your coursework, right? A little too far removed to remember. Awesome. So I guess we answered the question of what you were doing before you came, so thanks. I just wanted to kind of dive in and maybe ask a DRA and an RA, you know, what skills distinguish a really good RA or DRA from just, you know, like what would you say is an exemplar DRA quality? Autumn, you want to go first?
Sure. I think probably being able to navigate ambiguity, being excited about jumping into a problem or a research question that maybe isn't very clearly defined, and kind of getting excited about finding the data resources, looking for like the models that you need to answer the questions. And as we mentioned earlier, collaboration I think is really important. So again, kind of being excited to jump into that with other people.
Thanks. Jack, you want to pitch in what skills make really good research analysts?
Yeah, I guess I just kind of echo everything that Autumn said. I think just having like being able to adapt to changing circumstances, just because when you're like all of these projects that we're working on, you go into them kind of with one idea of how they're going to turn out, and then you hit roadblocks, you discover new things that kind of steer the projects in new directions. So I'd say that just kind of having that curiosity and that adaptability to kind of like change your course as needed is really important. And then also just being humble enough, I would say, to like, I don't know, recognize when an idea that you had or an idea you were pursuing is wrong. You know, being able to take in new information, kind of change your view on things is really important. So I just, yeah, kind of not being too rooted in like any one way of thinking is also very important.
Thank you both. So I will probably pick on some of you, but if I ask a question also to you guys and you feel very strongly about answering, please feel free. I guess the next question, could you maybe describe what's the day in the life as a research analyst? What's it like day to day or week by week being a data research analyst? Sarah, you want to go ahead and tell us your experience?
Sure. So as a DRA, I am on several different projects at the same time. So the typical day is not really a typical day. Like there's not just one particular, stereotypical day, but most weeks will generally entail some combination of like coding, SQL or Python, and then analysis of that data, reading documentation or reading Stack Overflow, writing, meetings, like reviewing code and papers. And then just what combination that is just depends on the week.
Awesome. Kayla, do you want to tell us what a day in the life as a research analyst?
Yes, so no day is the same, and it will often depend on what research projects you have going on. But I would say typically majority of my time is spent on those research project obligations, and depending on what stage the project is in, that will go from anything from analysis to research and writing, to editing, soliciting feedback, talking with colleagues about that project, where it's heading, and getting their thoughts for input. So part of it is collaborative, part of it is independent research and writing. And then another chunk of my time, my day and week is spent on things like reading current events, discussing maybe a cyber event with colleagues during meetings, things related to professional development, things related to networking, and getting your research and findings out there to the right people. So there's definitely an element of professional development and advocating for your research and brainstorming new topics, I would say is also part of the day.
Great, thanks so much. If anybody feels compelled to answer that as well, feel free while I find my next question. All right, so can you describe at a high level the research process from initial ideation to publication at CSET? So kind of maybe touching upon the freedom for your position to define their own research agenda, or kind of what that process looks like as you begin to think up of a new project. If anybody wants to answer, otherwise, Micah, do you want to jump in?
Sure. So CSET has a number of different types of products that we produce. The two major ones are data briefs and issue briefs. Issue briefs can leverage data, but oftentimes it's more analytical and qualitative in nature. But for both, the process is often kind of similar. Either an analyst or a fellow comes up with a research idea, or sometimes we get a directed question from someone in government, and there's a process there of thinking through what resources would we need to answer this question. Can we use our data sources? Usually it can just be sort of a discussion with a manager if it fits nicely within one of our existing lines of research. But the whole process is usually very collaborative. We build into all of our products multiple points where you present to colleagues and receive feedback there. And eventually all of our pieces, when drafts are finished, when we've done the analysis, all of our pieces go out to external reviewers for comments from experts in the field. We adjust based on that. And then we do final editing and formatting stuff before publication. That's the general process. People usually have a pretty good amount of freedom to define their areas of research. Analysts sometimes will be tasked for specific projects that are overseen by senior fellows, but they also have a lot of freedom to develop their own project ideas on the side and see those through from beginning to finish. So it's a lot of freedom. It's definitely much more autonomy than I think a lot of other think tanks provide to analyst level positions.
Awesome, thanks. Again, feel free to jump in if anybody wants to tack onto that. But I have a question specifically about the data research analyst. So Sarah or Autumn. Sarah, I know you talked about how you're working across a lot of different lines of research and projects. How many projects would a typical DRA work on at one time? And does that span one line of research? Are you working across multiple, or does it kind of depend? And maybe chat a little bit about that.
I think typically I'm on 4 to 9 different projects at the same time, but they will be like varying levels of work, right? So some of them might only require a couple of hours of work per week, and then others might require more. Some weeks a project might not require really anything from me because I'm waiting on feedback from the analysts or otherwise, external review. But yeah, those will typically span multiple lines of research. Autumn, is your experience similar?
Yeah, so I think also another kind of follow-up question is, I don't think, Sarah, I'm going to speak for you, sorry. Sarah nor I have a really strong background in policy or anything like super specific to the lines of research. Like, we're data researchers like first and foremost, so we're able to like work across a lot of different projects and kind of like learn with the experts that we're working with on the topic at hand. But yeah, I would say probably like 6 to 9 or so projects.
Awesome, thanks. So my next question for the research analyst would be, how frequently do you engage with data directly as opposed to other sources of information? Is there a 50-50 split, or does it kind of vary, or in your experience? Jack, I see you pondering over there. You want to give it a go?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's an interesting question. I think that kind of varies on the project. So as Mike had mentioned, CSET does data briefs and issue briefs mostly. And the data briefs obviously are very, very data heavy. And so since I joined CSET about a year ago, I've done a couple data briefs. We've had some folks with the data team kind of advising us through those, but I was able to do a lot of data work. So for those couple projects, I would say that like maybe 2/3 to 75% of the time was spent engaging with data, and then the rest of it was kind of just reading reports, reading just various documents, kind of that allow you to contextualize that information. And then there obviously you'll have projects completely on the other side where it's very like not a lot of data involved, a lot more kind of theoretical, just a lot more, I guess, reading of text rather than I don't know, dealing with numbers. But I would say that just kind of broadly, and correct me if I'm wrong, anybody on this call, but I think that one thing that kind of sets CSET apart from a lot of other think tanks in this space is kind of our focus on data. So a lot of our research is very data driven. We have access to a lot of like really great databases that allow us to, I don't know, come up with, have insights that a lot of other places won't have. So I think that while there are some projects that don't require a lot of interacting with data, like most of them touch on data at least somewhat.
Great, thanks. All right, so we'll switch. I'm gonna kind of ask an overarching question about professional development, and just ask to think about what professional development opportunities you've taken advantage of while you're at CSET. Maybe talk about your favorites. If anyone wants to go, otherwise I'll pick on somebody, of course. Kayla, do you want to tell us about some I know you mentioned it. Do you want to tell us about some professional development you've taken advantage of? Maybe name a favorite or just kind of give us a variety.
Oh, yes. Well, this kind of goes back to Jack's point on working with data. So I've only authored officially one data brief, but I have worked with data for all of my reports and research. So it is data-driven analysis and research. And part of that is getting better at data visualization and learning different tools. So as soon as I joined CSET, I found a really supportive environment just to kind of pursue some different learning opportunities to learn more about data visualization. I learned a little bit about R. I learned how to use Excel more effectively to build data visualizations and really nice bar charts and graphs that display information in a productive way, not just a pretty way, but a way that readers can interpret the information how it's supposed to be interpreted. And I really, really appreciated that and enjoyed that, both professionally, but also just because it was a great curiosity of mine. So that was one. And then the other is just kind of what I mentioned. You have time as a research analyst, and it's part of your job, right? It makes you a better research analyst if you stay up to date on current events. If you're reading maybe the hot new book that just came out about a certain component or aspect of AI. So I really enjoy that type of intellectual enrichment that also makes me a better analyst.
Awesome, thank you.
Olivia, I can add a little here too. I think the professional development aspect is a really valuable part of being an analyst here at CSET. We're encouraged to spend 10% of our time, so 4 hours a week, doing professional development. And that can take a lot of different forms. It can be you do an online course and you pay for it out of your professional development budget. It can be events that CSET itself organizes to do, like, mini workshops on writing or getting your research into the hands of policymakers or those sorts of things. And it can also be very different from person to person. So I'm a little more of a techie guy, maybe, for the analysis team at least. So a lot of the stuff I do is brushing up on my Python or learning how to build AI models in TensorFlow and do stuff myself. But some of our other folks, people who do more of the China analysis, for instance, might spend their professional development practicing their Mandarin. So it's really flexible. Analysts have a budget each year to pay for professional development expenses that's dedicated for that. And we also have resources to some of broader professional development stuff that Georgetown manages. The library, for instance, has a lot of resources for different technical skills that can be useful.
Thank you. And just going back to, we really do take professional development very seriously here. We really do encourage and expect our whole entire team to dedicate time for that. As I said, with our mission, we're not only providing, recommendations and research to policymakers, but we're also, training up the next generation of those policymakers, which we hope would come out of CSET. And so making sure that we're able to fill in gaps and be able to go out into the world as the stronger analyst, researcher, writer is always the goal here. So just to add a little tidbit there. I have a question that I thought pretty interesting about mentoring. So can you please describe your mentoring experience at CSET, both as a mentee and a mentor, and maybe how you sought that out? Were you matched up with them? Did you have to seek them out on your own, or did it come naturally? Or if anybody on here has any strong feelings, let me know. Otherwise, Autumn, do you want to give it a go?
I don't think I have mentored anyone or been mentored by anyone, so probably not a great person to ask. Has anyone else? I'm the worst. I'm always like, and I'm also doing a PhD, so I have all of this like side stuff with Georgetown. It all feels like one big happy family, but like my experience is a little different.
That's all right.
I'll use that just to jump in and say, I oftentimes there isn't a super formalized mentoring process at Georgetown, but I'm sure Autumn would agree that like we do have a very collaborative team spirit. And we do have a lot of fellows and research senior fellows who are really dedicated to helping the analysts they oversee improve, even if it's not an official like mentor-mentee relationship. We are really invested. So generally, there's not a fellow or a senior fellow I can think of at CSET who would brush off an analyst who is coming to them and asking for help developing some set of skills. Others might have other experiences to share, though.
Yeah, and to double up on what Micah said, it's pretty common to have one-on-ones or working relationships with folks on different teams or analysts and stuff to help hone the skills that you want to hone, even if there's not necessarily a formal reporting or mentor relationship, that you're still sort of getting help with whatever it is you want help with, be it writing or like other professional questions you might have, like if you're applying to graduate programs or whatever it might be, you can still get direct support from most of the folks here.
Awesome, thanks. We touched on this tangentially, but question, can analysts pursue higher education in DC alongside their work, ranging from language education to graduate degree? Yes, I am in school part-time. Autumn mentioned that she's also in school, Sarah. So some of us here are working full-time and doing school part-time. Georgetown has a wonderful tuition assistance program, benefit for the full-time employees as well, that helps cover the cost of higher education. More of that is on our website and then the FAQ. We also have options to audit classes. We have access to a lot of Georgetown, professors that are more than happy, again, to engage with us. So yes, that is definitely an option that we allow our researchers to do. So skip over that. Another question real quick. So when a research analyst joins CSET, what is the onboarding process like? Do new analysts work with other researchers for a few projects, or do you jump right in to do your own independent work? Jack, you want to answer that one for us?
Sure. Yeah. So the onboard, I mean, it's a fairly easy onboarding process, just the process itself. You come in, like, everyone's very happy to meet you. You can set up calls as you like with people just to kind of get to know the team. CSET gives you like an onboarding buddy at the organization. Autumn was actually my onboarding buddy when I joined. There's someone there who can just like kind of answer any random questions that you might have when you start. And then as far as the nature of the work goes, that's exactly right, actually. So you get assigned to, at least for the RAs, manager, and at least in my experience, I did a lot of work with my manager for the first like few months that I was there. A couple of new projects that we had started, help him finish up some of the old projects he was working on. And then, after a certain amount of time, you just, once you learn how the organization works, you get a little bit more expertise in whatever area you're focused on. You do have a lot more freedom to kind of pursue your own interests and projects. So I don't know.
Thank you,
Kayla or Micah, if that was your experience.
Fairly similar. So I also kind of joined the Cyber AI work stream, as well as the AI workforce team. And I had the opportunity to both start a research interest of my own and a project that turned into a paper on my own, out of my own curiosity, and also dive right into existing research and contribute to authored reports that were already in the works. So those were going on in tandem, but it was a great mix of being able to pursue what I wanted to pursue out of my own curiosity, and then also dive into something that I found really exciting with people who knew a lot and could get me up to speed, and from whom I learned a lot, and contribute to new areas of research that were entirely new to me.
Thanks. A couple more questions. One for the DRA specifically, and maybe giving us some insight on what the interview process looks like, and specifically like coding or tech, the aspect of that, and what that was like for you. So Autumn or Sarah, if you want to.
Yeah, so I did a coding task prior to having an in-person interview, and then part of the in-person interview was a technical interview, and the coding task is SQL and then some Python or R. So I guess, brush off the rest of your coding skills, but I promise it's not too scary.
Yes, hopefully none of this is too scary. All right, one more question for the panelists. We got a bunch of questions that I can answer quickly at the end, but I love this question, and it's a good question that I might ask everyone to say a word on, or maybe not actually. Work-life balance. Everyone wants to have work-life balance. How do you feel CSET does at that? Do you feel like you have a pretty good work-life balance? Maybe some words on that. Micah?
Sure. So I can actually start by saying I saw one other question fly by in the chat was about working in the office or not. As you can see, I'm in an office building. This is not my apartment. This is not what my living space looks like. So I'm actually pretty deliberate about coming into the office precisely for work-life balance reasons. I know that some people don't mind it. Some people feel that it's better to separate where they do their work from where they do everything else. But it's completely optional. A few people come into the office regularly. All the other analysts on call right now are speaking from their bedroom or their living room or something. So it's a total option there. But that's one aspect. In general, I would say, CSET is not so demanding as a lot of other places. There's no expectation for me to check email or Slack after 5 p.m. There's no real expectation to work on weekends. It is rarely the case that things are so urgent that they require you to give up evenings. It's possible that it can happen, especially if there are, say, targeted questions from the government that need a quick turnaround time. But usually that, frankly, will end up affecting fellows and senior fellows more than it will analysts. So yeah, I think CSET has been pretty comfortable for me in terms of work-life balance.
Anybody else want to go? I know I said we'll go around, but I don't think that's appropriate. Plus, we're running out of time. So I have a couple questions here. I think most of them are answered in our FAQ. You do not need a clearance to work here at CSET. We do not conduct classified work. We are looking for people ideally to start within summer or by summer 2022, which is, and I know questions, if you're in school right now, your degree should be conferred by the time you start work. Yes, graduate level coursework is accepted as experience. A combination of experience and coursework is always great. I think really to drive a point home is if you can explain to us why you believe it's appropriate and you are qualified, then we will consider it appropriate. How do you convey yourself in that message? What should the writing sample look like? Any representative writing sample that is solely authored is appropriate. We look at the logic, the flow, the language, presentation, evidence, and argumentation. Obviously, any policy specific would, since that's the type of writing we do, we'd encourage you, but that's not mandatory. And are there different levels of research and data research analysts? No. We have senior fellows, research fellows, and research analysts. Those are the different positions. Let me see. I think that is all we have here. Again, I know that there are a lot of questions in the chat, and I apologize if I didn't get to all of them. We will try to upload those questions and answer them and update our FAQ, which is a living document. Again, it should be in the chat right now. But we will also email that out to you. Thanks again to our panelists here on the screen, and also to Rita, Igor, Kat, and those behind the scenes to help make this happen today. As a reminder, we will send an email in the next couple days or so. It'll have a link to this recording, the link to the FAQ, and our careers page. If you have any questions that aren't answered by sometime within the next week or so on that FAQ, please feel free to send us an email at cset@georgetown.edu. We really look forward to reviewing all of your applications. And thanks so much for tuning in. Thank you guys for taking the time today to speak with us. Micah, Kayla, Sarah, Jack, Autumn.